Hi, everybody. Now I get to go back to the clicker, I think, which, by the way, you'll want because I'm not good at the whole back and forth thing. All right. Hi, everybody. So Mark has a funny sense of humor. He likes to make me go right after lunch so that I can watch everybody kind of trickle in and miss half of my story, which is a lot of fun because then later on I get a whole bunch of people afterwards that want to catch up. So it becomes a drinking game. Anybody who trickles in after maybe the first 5 minutes will definitely have to have a drink. All right, so what is DevSecOps? You know, we've been talking about it today. There's a whole bunch of people doing it. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of information, and I'm also going to solicit for everybody here to start getting involved. A little bit about me. I have worked at Intuit for the last 4.5 years. I've been in this industry for well over a few decades. I'm not going to say quite how long I've been in security, but it's pretty much too darn long. It's a long time to think about, and it's also a long time to have a goal of trying to make everything better. Security is one of the things that I believe is needed for technology to continue to advance. I'm the primary founder for DevSecOps. I've helped to found the all-day DevOps track, which I'm super excited about because it has kind of exploded worldwide. Tens of thousands of people have joined that, and that's pretty awesome. I'm also one of the premier founders of Hacker Girl, which is something that's just getting ignited now to bring more women to the cybersecurity field. So I'm excited about all these different things. As you can imagine, that means that I have very little time. I'm going to start this conversation off with unicorns suck. And the reason I think unicorns suck, and by the way, this is actually how most security talks start. They start with some cat picture. Every security conference I've been to, it seems to be themed around some cute cat picture. I'm actually pretty allergic to cats, but not tigers. So I'm going to compel us to talk about how we're going to upgrade our cats to tigers during this talk. Software's eating the world. Yeah, no duh. 450,000 open jobs right now in software, and just a specific query that I did recently. Mark Andreessen talked about this in 2011, and if you haven't noticed, pretty much everything, including your toaster, runs software. It's kind of scary. DevOps is eating the world. Yay! Almost 1,500% uptick in the number of jobs that have been opened recently. I think that's pretty cool. In 2 years, we've seen 1,500% uptick. That's kind of starting to look a lot like the cloud journey that's going to come here next. So the cloud is up almost the same amount in the last few years, which I thought was kind of incredible because it means that we're all changing and transforming, and it's like a hockey stick. How many people feel like their skills are becoming a hockey stick along with them? Yeah? I can tell you I feel like that, and I know many people on my team who kind of like are sitting right around in here. They probably feel like that too. How many people code? See, I would expect that in this crowd. That's kind of cool. I was in the CSA track a little bit earlier, and it was maybe a few people. I would say that the whole security industry is starting to change and transform, and it's going to be around cloud and DevOps. And that means something very important. From a security perspective, if cloud and DevOps are eating the world, security is blocking the world. The conversation is very much about how there's a lot of unicorn and fairies and all kinds of things happening, and basically how security hasn't figured out how to move upstream or become a player at the left side of the equation. Somehow security professionals are not known to be good at ideation or software creation. And I remember a few years back when Josh Corman said this very statement, and I actually thought about changing careers because decades in, my skills were no longer needed. But you know, this is the end of security as we know it. And at the time I was like, and later on he added, and isn't it a good thing? And then I'm like, oh hell, what does this man mean? Well, it turns out that what he meant is that security is going to become part of the conversation, and it needs to become part of the conversation. And when it comes down to it, the little picture here about unicorns pooping and us being a bunch of security janitors, not all that exciting to me. If you missed my last con presentation, I talked about how to eat better so that you can have biodegradable poop so that we can get out of janitorial business. Frankly, I don't like being considered a proctologist, and I don't think that anybody in the security business does either. What's that mean? Well, how do we change so we can avoid extinction? Security becomes extinct, and so will technology, and so will software. Because when it comes down to it, if hackers can take over the world, then none of the things that you get to experience, all of the technology that you have in your household, becomes pretty useless pretty quickly. How many of you would like to have a pacemaker that's completely hackable by somebody? No? Yeah. What about when you start thinking about somebody who's diabetic, who has an insulin pump that's reachable by the internet, has its own IP address? Anybody excited about the Mirai botnet that can take it out? That could be a bad day for somebody. Or, wait a minute, didn't we just talk about self-driving cars? Who has a self-driving car? My boss has this really cool new car that it's attached to his phone, and I keep telling him not to get too close to me. It's too enticing. As an interesting red team target, I keep telling him that his red car keeps talking to me at night. So DevSecOps. I said I was one of the premier founders. I think a few years ago, I was the only one who was willing to put it on my CV. I looked it up at the time, and on LinkedIn, it wasn't anything that you could click on to say that I had that skill. No one else said it was part of their skill set. So I'm the first person who said, you know what, let's brand what we do with development, security, and operations. And the reason it's security in the middle, because there's always been AppSec and DevSec, basically, and security operations. And when you bring those things together, you really get a full picture. And developers need to have the ability to speak security in their ideation of software. And operations needs to be able to understand and entertain security at the very end so that incidents and remediation take place the right way. That also means that making everybody take security seriously and make it their responsibility is part of the journey. How many people here speak security? I would assume in an RSA conference, I would see a lot of security hands. How many people speak DevOps and decided to come to a security conference? Oh, okay, we're starting to attract a lot more people. I think that it's really interesting to see a lot more DevOps, specifically, at conferences like this, because, by the way, you're the ones who are going to make all the security decisions going forward, and the people that are attending this conference are going to become your best friend. Security people are rough. I only became human like 5 years ago. I don't even speak English. They say I speak Shanglish, which is basically my name kind of like butchered with English, because I somehow talk about something and people go, what was she saying? Can you translate? And so I've got a whole team of people who translate what I talk about, which is really cool. And I'm very excited that they're all here today. Oh wait, only a few, because I bite. So why is it necessary? Who knows what a Wordly map is? I am in love with Wordly maps. They make my point so elegantly. They're kind of exciting. They have all these little lines and things, and you kind of get to spend some time with your thoughts, and you put little dots on a map, and you talk about value. Security professionals don't usually talk about value. I kind of already seem kind of weird and strange, right? I don't speak human, I don't speak security. I kind of speak a little DevOps. I did start as a developer, which means that, like you, I probably have a lot of interesting stories about software that became insecure, and that's how I really got into security. And ultimately, if I look at what's happening with penetration tests, and we're looking at how we're changing the world, well, DevSecOps is really at the heart of that, especially with the cloud coming to bear. I am a big fan of Wordly maps because they primarily pull together your thinking about what's happening right now, what's commoditized, what's getting settled, how are we starting to see transformation take place, and who the heck is pioneering. And by the way, on both ends of those journeys, it's pretty lonely. But there's a lot that can change, and what I will tell you is that for everyone in this building now, and everybody who's going to attend the RSA conference for the next few days, the greatest thing that can happen is that we all start sharing, that we all start taking this mission on. Because security needs you. Whether you're a developer, whether you're operations, or you're a bunch of security professionals who have realized that you need to change and you need to understand the next generation of security, It's all up here. It's starting to become a new thing. And by the way, I'm not the only one who's using Wordly Maps as a security professional. You'll see a lot more out there if you type in security plus Wordly Map. It's kind of an interesting thing, and I love the fact that I'm seeing more security vendors do it. Comparing our maps to each other can help us to change and transform what's happening. So what is DevSecOps? Well, there's a whole bunch of what it is, and there's a whole bunch of what it is not. It's a mindset, it's a bunch of skills, it's tooling, it's what we make of it. It's a lot of experimentation, and ultimately every company is going to have their own flavor of DevSecOps. Just like they have their own flavor of DevOps, everybody has people that have to understand something. They have to have the change leadership necessary to be able to learn new things. And that means that as a security professional, you're also going to be teaching as much as you are experiencing the change yourself. It's no longer good enough to be a security professional that makes all the decisions, makes all the approvals happen, but ultimately who transforms how everybody else operates. So how do you do DevSecOps? Well, there's kind of 4 main pillars is what we've found. And those 4 main pillars are security engineering, security operations, compliance operations, and security science. I've seen recently security science kind of becoming a big thing because of all the new AI capabilities and machine learning. I love the fact that I can now go to a cloud platform and figure out how to make a decision and predict where an attacker is going to take advantage of my software. And by the way, if you don't have those skills yet, you're going to need them. And there's this whole adversarial science capability out there that's just magically starting to pop up because security is a big data problem. It is the biggest big data problem that your company has. Finding a needle in a needle haystack is really difficult. So how hard could it really be? If you've seen this, you've probably seen the other part of this equation, which is somewhere in this chain, DevOps happens, and I love this pipeline because it means that software is going to be continuous. As you make things happen, all the software that you bring to bear, the pipeline is pretty easy. You put your software into GitHub or some other version control system, and your build process comes along and scoops up all the changes and then eventually plops it into either a cloud or a data center or maybe even onto your laptop. And along the way, all these tests got fulfilled so that you could make your software come to life. And at the very end, there's monitoring capabilities, and all of those things culminate in a lot of software. But what it doesn't culminate in is, right now, security is not necessarily built in, and it's going to be very difficult because right now, the security landscape looks like a whole bunch of people saying they do DevSecOps, and a whole lot of technology that doesn't have APIs, that doesn't have the capabilities necessary, doesn't run properly, and ultimately doesn't have smaller iterative tests. If you can imagine, you can hack the heck out of most of these products, and they will ultimately do what you want, but it's a lot of hacking to make those things come to bear. When you're publishing continuous software, you're doing so in an iterative fashion, and that means that software itself gets broken up into little bits. Most security tests run end-to-end. That's rough. That means that every time you want to push a small code change to your production environment, if they run end-to-end, how much time is it going to take for every publish to be able to be pushed to develop from a development environment into production? Well, it means that they have to either go through all these checks from left to right, or somewhere in here, back from right to left, all the defects are going to get captured. If you can imagine, if you wait till the very time at which monitoring takes place, those bugs are going to cost you a lot of money. It costs a lot less to find your defects closer in time to when they either got decided or implemented and make those bugs never make their way to production. So what types of skills are necessary? So I kind of asked, all right, how many people are developing code? All right, so we got security in the room. How many operations guys are out there? Yeah, okay, a few. All right, awesome. And by the way, what we did was an experiment. We brought a bunch of developers, a bunch of security, and a bunch of ops into one big melting pot group called DevSecOps. We got long, flat tables. We got everybody sitting really close together. And we created this really cool ecosystem where everybody got to make decisions, both all the way through from Dev, Sec, and Ops. And it's kind of been an interesting journey because As you can imagine, a little bit of security got bled into the developers, a little bit of ops got bled into the developers, and all of a sudden they were like, well, I know how to publish my code, I know how to keep my code running and available. And oh, by the way, my stuff isn't all that hackable anymore. And it happened across the board. And so we went from 10 people, which, by the way, I hired 2 sets of 5. In the first 4 weeks we decided to do this project, I hired 5 people, 5 rare people, because I said, come to the dark side. We don't have cookies. But ultimately, you're going to get to do something groundbreaking and change the world. And they kind of took a bet. And so we have some really crazy capabilities in my company. There's now 35 people who do DevSecOps. We've raised each one of them. We've organically built the skills required to do this job. And everybody's been on that journey together. And that means collaboratively and other. Is everyone bought in? I like this slide because, by the way, how many people have their companies bought into DevOps? So like 3 out there? Maybe 10, all right. How many got their company bought into doing security? All right, now hold your hands up and leave them up for a minute because it's going to be interesting. At speed and scale. Really? Speed and scale? Wow, all right. You guys have them completely built into CI/CD then because, oh, and by the way, I want to talk to all of you because you're now going to become my heroes and we're going to go on the road together. I'm really excited about that because maybe a few years ago there was no one in the audience who had that statement that they could make. And it's a great thing to see, but what I've found is this. If you rely on competency as your way to bring people together, you'll ultimately bring them together, whether they be managers, dev, sec, or ops, or some other variation, even lawyers. As long as you rely on competency and you don't worry about too much collaboration, you don't worry about cultivation, you don't worry about control, when you bring people together to get really skilled and you teach each other and you're learning together, ultimately you can actually form bonds that are very significant and will help you to produce safer software sooner because everybody's on the journey with you. Is there a playbook? So I put up a word wall. Everybody's going to have to memorize this before I take it to the next slide. All right, just kidding. But we did this so that you could understand that it's going to take an operating model, processes, and tools. And by the way, this is just the beginning. There's many different maturity elements to making a DevSecOps capability come to life. And at the very end, it pretty much looks like a slide that looks a little bit more characteristic to what's the difference. So as an example, I run the red team. That's kind of how I look at my cyber attack tiger team. My red team has basically gone from being compliance specialists, some people who have had jobs where they've done AppSec, and now we basically tell them hack the hell out of everything, whether it's moving or not. And we tell them to measure it too. We say, you know what, how many hours did it take you to break into something? That's how strong the decision was that was made for whatever the security was in a software workload. So if it took 8 hours to break it, by the way, that software decision wasn't very strong. Nowadays, what we've found is that a lot of the cloud capabilities that you have and a lot of the decisions you'll make about software that gets continuously published is actually pretty breakable because hackers are using the same stuff that we're using to publish software to publish their hacks, to keep track of the stuff that you're pushing out. And it's really interesting to see with honeypots that this is the way in which we're all seeing operations happen. What's the best way to organize around it? Well, bring a bunch of information in. Lots of people want to believe that security is all about hygiene, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to have millions of things to work on, and by the way, you won't be able to prioritize a whole lot. If you want to really get ahead of what you're trying to accomplish, you need to find the most important mistakes as early as possible in the process. But ultimately, if you can't catch it there at the very tail end, you shouldn't waste your time on trying to deal with your hygiene. You should be trying to predict what a target looks like to an outside attacker, because ultimately it's just a matter of when, not if, but when. And so understanding that when is what I said a little bit earlier about red team. Know how long something takes to break. Finally, there's another way to think about this. If you're going to work upstream, if you're going to shift all the way to the left, Have some guardrails. Most people can remember 5 things. They say it's 8, but it's really 5, and I actually believe it's 3. Sometimes it's really hard to get things built into people's knowledge base. The first and most primary thing that you have to consider is that zoning and containerization is really paramount to making your software safer. And when we get to the end of this, encryption can really be a good mechanism to keep your data safe. If there's 5 things you can tell a developer or an operations specialist or a DevOps, for that matter, to do, it's to concentrate on these 5. So I'm going to tell you there's only a few more slides. One of the things that we'd like to solicit in everyone that we talk to is become part of the Troupe. Help us to learn. Figure out experiments you can run. Write everything down. Realize that our journey together is all about how we do this. And by the way, if there's low-hanging fruit that we all have, we're creating the very environment we're trying to fight against. If attackers have low-hanging fruit, it's their opportunity to teach other hackers how to do things, because then there's something that they can actually exploit and build confidence doing. But if we get rid of it, if we get rid of that low-hanging fruit, we ultimately make it much more expensive for our adversaries to invest in creating new hackers. Like you, it's really difficult to find great specialists. If you think about it, there's 1 million security jobs that have gone unfilled. And by the way, the hacking industry, there's a lot of people out there, but a majority of them are not necessarily the ones that build tools. So I said it was time to upgrade our cats. I don't necessarily like little kitty cats, I like big kitty cats. And everybody on my team I consider a big tiger because they're really hard to deal with, but when they have big skills, they're also really necessary. I'd much rather put a big cat into a room with an adversary than a little cat. So finally, if everyone's participating, we can change the world. I'll tell you, I'm going to leave you with this last slide. If you're not getting involved, you should be. Write an article, get involved, and change what we have to think about, because our children demand it. The technology that we've all come to love, the reason why we come to these conferences to learn and make things better, is really about thinking about our future and our children's future. I can't implore you enough to do so, and I go around doing this on a voluntary basis because it's so important. Thank you today for your time.